Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
The jam session, you just gotta kind of rock out to your favorite songs while you work out.
We also get to work out using drumsticks.
Lions Clubs International has partnered with the football team here at the University of Alabama, the Peach Bowl, and the school system here in Tuscaloosa to promote defeating diabetes by living healthy lifestyles.
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 9 years old. Thought my life was over, thought sports was over for me, but as you can see, I'm still living out my dreams, playing football and baseball at the University of Alabama.
It's always a great time to connect with students and teach them how to exercise because that'll just lead to a healthier lifestyle.
I want to tell y'all what exactly diabetes is. We're seeing a rise in type 2 diabetes in children, mostly because we're seeing a rise in obesity, and that has mostly to do with the kids are not getting the exercise outside of school that they need.
Going outside and playing 30 minutes a day or more, that's very important. Limiting that screen time to an hour, maybe a day, that's really important because we want kids to be up and moving more.
It's an opportunity for us to share with the community that with proper education, good food choices, medication management, that they can still have productive lives.
I just want to give a message to all the kids that have diabetes. Keep living, control your blood sugars. You can do anything. Don't let this stop you.
It definitely inspires me because, I've had family members who've had it, so I know that it's important for me to do its best to take care of myself.
If we focus on eating healthy and working out right now while we're still young, we can help ourselves in the future.
Our goal as Lions is to improve the quality of life for all of those who have diabetes. Good afternoon and welcome to Being Lion Compton, a guide to our general liability insurance policy. A few weeks ago during one of our Membership Monday webinars, the topic of the general liability insurance being a benefit to our members was brought up, and from that there was a lot of questions and a suggestion that we take and look at this topic today. We're excited that our staff in Oak Brook is ready to help us, Richard and Amanda and Christy. And as you're looking to your right at the control panel, there's two handouts that have been provided to you. One is the liability insurance program PDF, as well as a PowerPoint concerning the specialty clubs in Alaska that was developed in 2018. If you have questions today as we're going along, you can type them into the chat box and our staff will read those to us at the appropriate time, and we'll get our guest to answer those. Or if you'd like to raise your hand, you can raise your hand and be able to log in and ask your question personally and interact with our guest today. I'm Jerome Thompson, Constitutional Area Leader for the Global Membership Team portion of the Global Action Team. It's my pleasure to host today, and our special guest today, answering all of your questions concerning the liability insurance, is Amy Pena. Amy is known for a distinct understanding of the legal issues affecting international nonprofits. She's employed by Lions Clubs International, the world's largest service organization, and where she has served as staff attorney and currently serves as general counsel for our association. For the last 14 years, Amy has devoted herself to serving the Lions of the world. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here at the seminar.
Doing well today. And you heard a part of the introduction, but we had this long discussion about whether the liability insurance is a membership benefit. And then as we talked about specialty clubs, we talked about going out to organizations that maybe don't have general liability insurance and inviting them to become a Lions Club so that they can get under the umbrella of our general liability insurance policy. And so today what we'd like to do is talk about the policy itself, open it up for questions from our audience, and then conclude with any final comments that you might have. Toward that end, Richard, why don't we ask our audience, do they think and consider that the LCI liability insurance policy is a membership benefit? Can you launch that poll for us and get everyone involved?
Yes, sir. The poll has been launched.
Do you consider the LCI liability insurance to be a member benefit? Yes, no, not familiar with the LCI liability insurance.
And we're about to close the poll in 10 seconds. So the results were everybody, 78% said yes and 22 said no, they're not familiar with the LCI liability insurance program.
Well, Richard, the goal of today is when we finish that 100% will see that our liability insurance is a member benefit and one that we can sell to other volunteers as we engage them in helping to reach our goal of serving 200 million people per year. Amy, let's lay a foundation and give some general information about Lions Clubs International liability insurance before we open the lines up for questions from our audience. Can you give us just a brief overview of the insurance coverage?
Sure. So Lions Clubs International provides a general liability commercial insurance for all clubs around the world. And so this coverage provides $1 million worth of coverage per occurrence. It's $2 million aggregate. And it's a legal liability policy. It provides coverage to many, but not all liability exposures. I will note that it's not an accident insurance policy. It does protect Lions Clubs International, Lions Clubs International Foundation, the Lions Clubs and districts, and other named insureds. It is a large deductible plan, which basically means that while there is $1 million worth of coverage, it is $1 million deductible. So it's self-insured, and we really maintain the cost of the insurance through our claims management. And so the cost of the insurance is through the Lions Club's dues, and it is automatic, and it's paid by Lions Clubs International, and you don't have to do anything to sign up for it.
Toward that end, you said it's a large deductible plan. That $1 million deductible, is that paid by Lions Clubs International, or is that paid by the individual clubs?
So it is paid by Lions Clubs International, which is really part of the dues that goes into it. So we maintain a reserve, and so a lot of accounting that goes into figuring out how much money we have to maintain in order to maintain those deductibles to keep the insurance going, but it is paid by Lions Clubs International. So there's no cost up front to the clubs for any payments that are made from the insurance company. It is underwritten by Chubb Insurance, so that's the insurance company that you'll see on the paperwork. So those are the ones that provide the certificate of insurance.
And Amy, it says doesn't provide accident insurance. Can you tell us what that means?
So yes, so this is a general liability policy. So what that means is it pays sums that are due based on the fault of the Lions or the insured. So it has to, there has to be some liability. There has to be either negligence or some sort of fault that is found. It's not just a typical accident, which is paid regardless of fault. So that's why that's a little bit different. It's just a commercial general liability policy. So if somebody gets hurt, it's not automatically that it would pay. There just has to be some sort of showing that there was some fault at the Lions that they did, some sort of acts, some sort of negligence that they may have engaged in.
And so a Lions Club, once it's chartered, is automatically covered by this insurance without doing anything else or getting a certificate of insurance or anything?
That's correct. So it's automatic. So the certificate of insurance, all that does for the Lions Club is it shows proof of coverage. So if you're holding an event and somebody wants to say that you must show that you have proof of coverage, then you can obtain a certificate, and that will show that you have that proof. The other part of the certificate of insurance is that it will allow you to insure if you are applying for a permit from a city, or if you are holding your event at, like, say, a school, and they want to be named as an additional it's insured, we do permit that through the certificate process.
And I noticed on your side it says who's protected, and it says Lions International, LCIF, clubs and districts. Can you tell me, as we move to that next slide, about the coverage that may or may not be extended to Leo clubs or Lioness clubs?
Sure. So there are additional insureds under the policy, and those would be included as Lions, Leos, Lioness. And Leos and Lioness are considered as, projects of Lions clubs. So we wanted to make sure that the insurance extended to the events or to the exercises or things that the Lioness and the Leo clubs are engaged in, because they are projects of Lions clubs. So those are also considered additional insureds under the policy. They're specifically written in.
Let me ask you something, Amy. Occasionally a club will fail to pay the levy for a Leo club, and then that Leo club's not registered with Lions Clubs International because that money was not, the levy was not paid, and I think it's $100. But if that levy is not paid and that Leo club is out there and has a situation that they need that insurance coverage, are they covered or are they not covered?
Right. So that's a really good question. So Leo clubs and Lioness clubs, are only covered in that they are active clubs that are sponsored by Lions clubs. So if they are out there on their own and they are not currently sponsored by a Lions club, and they're pay the or that they're no longer sponsored by a Lions club, then the insurance wouldn't extend coverage to them. It's no different than if a Lions club is no longer an active Lions club and no longer has authorization to use the Lions name and logo, it also would not be covered under the policy.
Toward that end, and this is technical, and I've not asked this before, so you can defer if you'd like, a status quo Lions club covered or not covered?
That's a little bit different. Status quo is kind of our own internal issue. I would say that, they would be covered. If they're canceled and they're no longer able to use the Lions name and logo, then I would say that they wouldn't be covered. But technically under status quo, they're not supposed to be out there doing projects. But, there's a potential that they would still, would be coverage. So the insurance isn't really going to stop just because internally we've called them status quo.
Okay. And then as I've traveled, and there's Lioness clubs throughout the United States, and the question has come up. We have some Lioness clubs that have outlived their Lions club. For whatever reason, the Lions club is disbanded and walked away, but the ladies that are in the Lioness club continue to serve in that community. What I heard you say, I believe, was that if that a Lioness club is not actively sponsored by a chartered Lions club, our insurance is not going to extend to them.
Right. So a Lioness club that is not sponsored by a Lions club doesn't does not have authorization to use, one, the Lioness logo, and is not considered a project of the Lions Club. And so under that, they wouldn't have the coverage under our policy.
And so the Lions Club that's out there without the support of a host Lions Club needs to become Lions to get back under our umbrella of our liability coverage.
Right.
Okay. And then also you've got some multiple districts that approve foundations or eyeglass recycling centers, kid site programs. What about our insurance? Does it extend that far? Because I noticed on the slide it says other Lions organizations.
Right. So we permit other Lions organizations to use the Lions name and logo. And so under the insurance policy, we've allowed those organizations to fall as additional insureds if they meet our criteria and if they've been approved as Lions organizations. So what that means is if they've been approved, we generally use the term foundations, but it could be Lions Eye Banks, Lions Eyeglass Recycling Centers. It could be your club foundation. As long as they've been approved under by the legal department for use of the Lions name and logo and have met the criteria, which basically means that they are controlled and operated by Lions members, then they would be named insureds under the policy.
Amy, I think you've laid a great foundation here in the first 10 or 12 minutes of our webinar. These webinars are produced monthly by our Global Action Team leaders for the United States, Bermuda, Bahamas, and the islands of the Caribbean. Richard, would you show the Global Action Team video that may explain how we all work together and the synergy that we've created?
Yes, sir. Transferring over now.
Thank you. Richard, that music just makes me want to dance every time. Audience, if you've got questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box because we're getting to questions in just a second. And we've got several already good questions in the queue. Amy, as a club navigates through serving in a very litigious society, everyone wants to sue somebody for something. what do our club leaders need to consider as they're planning projects?
Right. While there is insurance coverage, that's definitely not the end of the story. We definitely want to make sure that the event that you're planning is safe for the Lions and the public that you're serving. So there's a few things that we want Lions to consider to help you navigate through that. So, the screen that you're seeing now shows you a list, and we'll just kind of highlight a few of these things. One of the things that I would say for every event that you're doing, whether it's a pancake breakfast or whether you're doing a race or a rodeo or a diabetic screening, appoint a safety officer. This person is in charge of making sure that the event is safe for the Lions and for also the public. And that safety officer should be aware of the event, the people that who should be contacted in case of an emergency. They should also be familiar with the proper procedures to be able to report things that happen. So, for every event you should have a safety officer. You should also be aware of what's covered in the insurance program. A lot of people ask, is this enough insurance? And, potentially you might need additional insurance depending on what the particular event is. Now, there are a lot of activities that we do categorize as hazardous activities, and they will probably be covered because we have a very broad coverage under our insurance program. But you may need to implement additional safety procedures to make sure that you reduce the risk of those hazardous activities.
Now,
We used
Amy,
to say that. Go ahead.
Oh, excuse me. I didn't mean to step on your discussion. I was just wondering, this coverage that we're talking about, does it extend to our cyber clubs and our special interest clubs also?
Yes, it does. And that's a great question, because a lot of our specialty clubs engage in activity that maybe they wouldn't be able to get coverage for outside of Lions. For example, a lot of general liability insurance programs have racing exclusions. For our particular program, that racing exclusion has been removed. And so events that have racing involved in them would still fall under the general liability program. Events that cyber clubs are doing would still be covered under the general liability program. You also want to make sure you have adequate supervision of the event as well. I think that that's key, whether you have children or whether you have large amounts of crowds coming and going to an event. Some of our high-risk events are things where you have to load people in and out of things like miniature trains, or if you're having a hayride or a parade. Those things you want to make sure you have plenty of people to help you conduct those events safely.
And Amy, and
I was going to say, make sure you have local legal counsel review contracts, but make sure it's a local legal counsel. Don't send them to me, please.
We only have 43,000 clubs, Amy. Can you not read everybody's contracts?
Well, I could try.
Most policies have some exclusions and things of that nature in them. Can you tell us maybe some of the things that are covered, which normally are not covered, as well as some of the things that our clubs need to look out for and maybe find additional insurance to cover?
Sure. So as I said, we have really broad coverage. So, bodily injury or property damage is covered by the policy. One of the things I do want to highlight in our coverage issues, which you can see here on this slide, is there is a $5,000 medical payment. So if you'll remember our discussion earlier where you asked me what's the difference between accident coverage and this, and I said there's no accident coverage because you have to have a showing of fault. $6,000 medical payment that is paid regardless of fault. And that used to be a $1,000 medical payment, but we changed it to $5,000 so that we could, quickly handle those smaller claims and move those out of the system. The other common things that are under the covered issues that you'll see are a defamation, personal and advertising injury, and then you'll also notice that there's some product liability insurance. The major exclusions that most Lions are aware of and maybe cause them a little bit concern and you will need additional insurance for is liquor liability. So what that means is that liability that arises out of the sale or distribution of liquor is excluded from the policy. So what that means is you'll need additional insurance in order to have coverage from that. Also coverage for co-sponsors and also workers' compensation. So if you have employees, which most clubs don't, but there may be districts and there may be larger foundations that have employees, the workers' compensation insurance is actually something you'll have to get your own separate insurance for. So those are some of the highlights. But
well, the audience has some questions too, and then I've got a few that I've jotted down from here as well. But Richard and Amanda, why don't we turn to the audience? What questions do some of our listeners have for Amy today?
We have a ton of questions actually popping up in our chat box. PCC Steve Anton would like for you to explain what hold harmless is.
So the hold
you can go into detail.
Okay. So what that means is that when you enter into a contract and you promise to it's a shifting of liability. So you're promising that you will take on the liability of that other person. So if you have a contract, it's a contractual term. So you're going to hold them harmless. You're going to take on their liability. That's the simplest way that I can describe that without getting too much into the legalese.
Okay. Steve, thank you very much for that question. And what other questions do we have there?
Lion Wendy Newport asks, do the Lioness Club need to be specifically named on the certificate, or is it assumed if both are active and in good standing? This is when you were talking about the Lioness Clubs being under the insurance.
Right. So if somebody's asking for proof of insurance and it's a Lioness event, with the club, I would say that the Lioness and the Lions Club should both be named on the insurance, the certificate of insurance. So when you're filling out that form, I would name them both on there.
Very good. What other questions do we have, or any hands raised?
Lion Tom Stewie asks, please discuss the ramifications of clubs owning property in the case of our club, park property, and buildings.
Okay, that's a great question. So if you own your own property, your club will need to purchase its own property insurance for coverage of damage to that property. There are other ramifications, I guess, if you own your own property for liability purposes, and that's that you have to maintain that property in good order. So if you have your own property and you're not maintaining it, and it causes somebody to trip and fall, or somebody gets hurt because of the damage to the property, that liability then would be on the Lions Club. So, so there's a lot of things that go into when you own your own property. You have to just make sure that if you have your own property, one, you get your own property insurance, and two, that you make sure that you maintain it so that it is safe for those who have the use of it.
Amy, let me ask a question there. If a club owns its own clubhouse, then the club would need to purchase hazard insurance for fire, wind, flood, things of that nature. This liability policy doesn't cover the structure itself. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, there is fire insurance if they're renting property, and that's where that comes into play.
So if my club were to rent the park that has a pavilion and we were cooking hot dogs and selling it and a fire broke out and burned the pavilion to the ground, then there would be coverage under the liability policy.
That's correct. Yeah.
But
We recently had a case. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just going to say we recently had a case where a club was renting a facility and they were frying donuts and they put the fryers away when they were hot and it burnt down the building. And the insurance did respond in that case. So it's when it's rented, but if it's their own property, your own insurance is going to have to respond to that.
Okay. Very good. Amanda, what other questions? These are great questions, don't you think?
Yes. We have a ton. And then I'm actually going to call on Lion Frank McGraw that has his hand raised.
Lion Frank, welcome to the webinar. What is your question today?
I didn't have a question. I'm sorry. I hit the button wrong.
Oh, that's all right. We're just proud you're here. And if you do have a question, raise your hand again and we'll call on you again. Amanda, who else?
I will call on Lion Kashmiri Delori. Kashmiri?
Lion Kashmiri, what question do you have for Amy today? Amanda, do you have a typed question?
Yes, we have tons of types questions. Those we can keep on rolling. A lot of Lions are actually asking, how are club directors covered, and should they recommend officer and director liability insurance also?
That's a great question. So this general liability insurance, it does not provide. I use the acronym D&O. It's Directors and Officers Liability Insurance. Which is like errors and omissions. And so if your directors and officers want separate coverage, they can purchase their own coverage. We do offer a program in the U.S. for reduced director and officer insurance program through our broker DSP Insurance. That's a reduced rate for Lions members.
That's a very good question, Amanda. What other questions or hands do we have raised?
There's a lot of questions about the forms. And Lion Kristen Glockoff asks, is there a form that must be filled out each year or with each event, etc.? Where is this form and who is it to be submitted to?
This is a great question. I get this all the time. There's no forms that you have to fill out for coverage. The coverage is automatic. The insurance goes into, we do a renewal each year, and it's renewed each year from September 1st through August 31st. And so if you need to show proof that we have insurance, that is the certificate of coverage. And you can obtain the certificate of coverage in a number of ways. One of the ways is to go to our website at lionsclubs.org. And if you just type in insurance, it'll take you to the insurance page, and you can go to certificate of insurance and you can fill out your own certificate of insurance. The other way is you can contact legal at lionsclubs.org, and we could also direct you to our risk management company that will give you and fill out a certificate of insurance form for yourself. But if you need it at all 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you could do it yourself on our website.
Amy, if I understand you correctly, when a club is chartered and that charter is sent out, this insurance is just automatically there. It's always going to be there, and there's nothing that a club has to do unless a third party asks them for proof of the insurance.
That is correct. There's nothing that a club has to do in order to apply for it or for it to be effective. I can't promise that it will always be there, but that's just the lawyer.
That's the lawyer in you, Miss Amy. The other thing that a club would have to do is if there was a claim or a potential claim, they would have to report that claim. And we'll cover that shortly as well, correct?
That's correct.
Now, Amanda, what other questions or what other Lions are there with their hands raised?
Lion Steve Espak asks, do you recommend the bonding of the officers? Do you know the percentage of clubs that do versus those that don't?
I recommend that clubs do get bonded, especially their treasurer or secretary. And we've always recommended that. It's not provided automatically by Lions Clubs International. I think that there are some districts that do provide it. I do not have any statistics as to what the percentage is.
Okay, what other questions?
I'm going to unmute Lion Mike Jansen.
Yeah,
Lion Mike from Winnipeg.
Hey, Jerome, it's Mike Jansen. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing, Governor?
No, not bad. PDG is a nice thing, let me tell you. I'll see you in a few days. My question is, being in Canada, I take it our clubs here are covered. And if we are, how does the exchange rate play into the coverage we have?
Okay, so first to answer your question, yes, you are covered. And the exchange rate, it is U.S. It's covered under, it is 1 million U.S. is the coverage that we provide. So I'm not exactly sure how they at what point they calculate the exchange rate, but that is the coverage limit, I would say. Right.
So then by today's exchange rate, we would probably be $1.3 million in Canada then under the amount that we would have from the U.S.
Right. Right.
Okay. Fair ball.
Thank you, Governor, and we appreciate your service to the organization. Amy, when I was a director, I had the opportunity to go to Winnipeg twice, once to help to charter a club up there in Mike's district. The Canadians there are just lovely. He runs a wayward home for Americans. Amanda, what other questions do we have?
I'm going to unmute Lion Roland Dunham II.
Roland,
He's
how are you doing?
He's self-muted. Oh, there he
Hello.
goes.
Hello, I have a question about. Hi, how's it going?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm about to get ready for Vegas soon, so can't wait to come see you guys.
Well, good. What questions do you have for Amy today?
Yeah, this is about the insurance thing. Is it based on each incident, or is it all the incidents? Like, if you have like multiple incidents that went on during an event, is the insurance is it planned by like over by the $1 million per incident, or just over the whole entire incident?
So it's $1 million per occurrence, and it's $2 million aggregate. So if you have an event that has several different occurrences, the total cap is going to be $2 million.
Okay.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was my question.
Roland, y'all are going to have to be, you're going to have to be safe in Virginia. It's $1 million per occurrence, 2 million total. So don't go over that limit, okay? Amanda, what other questions do you have?
We have a question here from Lion Joseph Rohali. If my club project is to build a handicap chair ramp and the ramp fails, does Lions Insurance cover it?
Yeah, that's a good question. That would be something that would be covered under the policy. It's more of that products that I was talking about. So a lot of times we know clubs get involved in construction projects, and if those construction projects go wrong or they build them in a faulty manner, then the insurance would respond.
Also, Amy, when I think of the products liability, I always think about the concession stands that Lions run a lot of times for a fundraiser. If we give half the town food poisoning, is that a products liability question?
It potentially could be, yes. It could be.
Very good. Amanda, what other questions do we have?
This question is from Lion Gregory Pryor. Regarding the fire insurance, is there fire coverage if the Lions Club is able to use the facility without a rental agreement?
Amy, they don't own the facility, but they also don't have a rental agreement. The town just says go use the pavilion or use the park. Is there coverage?
That's a good question. I believe it is because it's non-owned. I don't think it's just dependent on the rental. It's just that it's not owned.
As you can tell, our Lions are very thoughtful today. It's almost like Stump Amy with the insurance questions, but this is great because if we're going to get out and sell this insurance as a member benefit, we need to know what we're selling and how to sell it to these other organizations so we can bring them into our fold and expand the amount of service that we're rendering. Amanda, we've still got maybe 7 or 8 more minutes worth of questions.
We definitely do. We have plenty of questions to fill that time. We have another one here from Lion Mel Tryon. Can you explain use of personal auto coverage?
Oh, sure. So if you are using your own personal car that you own, your insurance is the one that's going to be used, or is going to be the one that's is going to respond. The Lions Club's insurance provides liability coverage for non-owned insurance, non-owned automobiles. So if your club is borrowing a car or renting a car, it would be like a secondary liability insurance for that non-owned car. If it's your own car, your insurance is going to cover it.
And so if a club were to rent a 15-passenger van and transporting youth to a diabetic camp and there's an accident or something of that nature, then possibly there's coverage under our general liability policy to help with the injuries that are sustained.
That's correct. That's correct. There's liability. Now, there would not be property damage for either owned or non-owned liability for vehicle coverage. So the damage to the actual automobiles would not be covered under either scenario. Just the liability would be for non-owned.
Very good. Amanda, another question, please.
One of the questions here from Lion Kashmiri Delroy is, my club is also a 301c3. Are the trustees of the club under this, or do they need to be covered by insurance for private vendor?
So the 501c3, we were talking about the foundations. If they're an approved foundation of Lions Clubs International, then those foundations would be covered under the general liability. But the general liability insurance is not a directors and officers liability insurance program. It does provide insurance coverage to the Lions members and the trustees or the officers of the Lions Club if they're included in claims for liability other than the errors and omissions for directors and officers types of claims. So you may want to look at getting separate D&O coverage for the trustees of your foundation, because that's not what's contemplated under a GL program.
Amy, you used the term an approved foundation. Approved by whom?
By Lions Clubs International, the legal division. So we send out, if you want to use the Lions name and logo in an entity that is not a club or a district, you need authorization to use the Lions name and logo in its operations, whatever that entity is.
So a council of governors can't just arbitrarily license or allow someone to use the Lions name, it has to go through Oak Brook's legal division. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Amanda and Amy, I'm not trying to stump you either. I just want to make sure that I understand clearly so that as folks listen to the webinar in years to come, that anything that's maybe fuzzy that we clarify for them. Amanda, what other questions do you have?
I have a question from Lion Paula Umrico. If a Lions entity is leasing space from another Lions entity and both entities are sued, how does the coverage respond?
Well, I mean, the coverage is going to respond on behalf of both of them to the third party, but they'll probably, it gets a little complicated as to who's going to, that's like a law school question waiting to happen, as we'll probably have to have different counsel for each entity, but the insurance will have to still respond individually.
Amy, sometimes sometimes our questions are so fact specific that there's just not enough meat there to give a good answer, because we don't know what they were sued for or who was suing or anything of that nature. But if our Lion was at Paula, would like to write that in detail and send it to your legal division, then you would respond to her, or someone on your team would respond to her. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that is correct.
Because we don't want anyone to walk away thinking they didn't get an answer, but sometimes we just need more facts to give a good answer. Amanda, that was the hardest question of the day. Do you have an easier one for us?
Maybe. Lion Linda Emerald asks, in my city, we have 3 Lions clubs that go in together to sell food and beverages at the local high school as a fundraiser for the school's athletic program and our own charities. Are all 3 clubs equally liable, or the club in charge for that particular year? We take turns managing the events.
It depends. It depends on who's responsible for, what's going on at that particular time and what the allegations are. So, liability is very fact specific. And so whether or not somebody is going to be liable for a particular issue in one circumstance may be different in a different circumstance. So that is another one that I just really can't answer without having all of the different facts laid out.
Amy, let me follow up with that and see if I might understand clearly. If you've got 3 clubs all coming together and you've got 2 members from each club working the concession stand and something goes wrong, it really doesn't matter which club that particular member belonged to, because Lions Clubs International general liability policy is covering all 3 clubs at the same time anyway, for whatever the loss is or whatever the damages were that was caused by a lion. Is that right, wrong?
That's correct. It doesn't really, it does matter, at the end of the day, but the coverage is going to be there no matter which club it is. So whether it's club A, B, or C, there's going to be coverage.
Okay. And as long as there's coverage, then if there's a loss, all 3 of them can report the loss to you. All 3 of them have coverage. None of them are paying any deductibles or anything out of their treasury for the loss. It's all coming from Lions Clubs International's funds. And so they just all work together and help you to defend the claim or help you to understand the claim and pay it if there's a liability.
Right. So, really the purpose of this insurance is to make sure there's a minimum amount of insurance so that the clubs can feel that they can go about doing their activities and have, some level of assurance that there's going to be coverage there for them, so that they can focus on serving their communities and serving, the members that are in need in their areas. Let us figure out the liability and all the facts and all of those things, and we'll work with the insurance company on those issues.
Serve as safely as you can and let Lions Club International handle the rest.
That's right.
Amanda, I think we got time for one more question.
Do you, how about, Amy, you get to choose. Do you want to talk about trademark infringement, or would you like to talk about using the logo for local baseball teams? One's hard, one's easy.
So since we're doing insurance, let's talk about the baseball team.
Okay. Back to the question. This is from Lion Ashley Kincaid. Back to the question about usage of Lions logo and name. If we have a local Little League team or baseball group we sponsor and they want to put up the logo to show we sponsor them, does that have to be run by International?
No, that doesn't have to be run by us. Clubs do that all the time. They sponsor them. The one thing that I will say is that if you want to, use the logo and you want to sponsor a local team, make sure your local name of the club is always used in connection with the logo. And I do want to point out one little thing about sports teams. So remember that medical insurance payment I talked about a couple minutes ago that was that $5,000 medical payment? The only thing that does not pay for is for injuries as a result of a sporting event. So if your club is sponsoring a local Little League event, or you're sponsoring a race, the medical payment insurance would not be eligible for injuries that are resulting out of the sporting event. Now, if it's out of somebody coming and going to the event or a faulty design of the event, that's a different issue. But actually engaging in the sporting event, that medical payment would not be available.
Amy, let me ask you, will you or your staff be available at the USA Canada Forum to answer additional questions in person?
Unfortunately, this year, we will not have a presence at the USA Canada Forum. I am trying to work with to find out who will be there from International that will have that information. But this year, we will not be there. I'm sorry to say that. But at the International Convention, we will have an insurance seminar with our insurance broker. So if somebody is going to the International Convention, we will have a seminar there in Vegas. And they will be available to answer a lot of these questions as well.
That is awesome. And at the forum in Columbus, the Global Action Team is going to have 3 seminars. One focusing on clubs, the Global Action Team at the club level, at the district level, and at the multiple district level. And so if you've not registered to go to the forum, here's why that you should go. Richard, can you show that video for us from the USA Canada Leadership Forum?
Not a problem. Transferring over now.
One location and 2.5 days, you can create more confidence in your leadership skills, learn to build teamwork within your club or district, and have a great time too. Your imagination isn't needed. It's a reality at your fingertips. Sign up today for the USA Canada Lions Leadership Forum, Columbus, Ohio.
And so you can join us at the forum to learn more about the Global Action Team, who's been putting together these webinars for you. And you can join Amy and her team in Las Vegas at the International Convention to ask more questions about the liability insurance. Amy, you've done a wonderful job today. What else would you like to share with us as we wrap up this webinar?
Well, the one thing that we haven't talked about is claim reporting. So what I would like to say is if you are aware of an injury that happens at one of your events and you need to file a claim, it's very simple. Report it right away and call 1-888-217-8074 for the U.S. and do it right away and do not admit liability. If you're outside the U.S., contact the legal division and send it to lions@lionsclubs.org.
Amy, thank you so very much. Now, one quick question. Is it better to report a potential claim that doesn't become a claim or just wait until you're served with litigation? How early do you really want to know about the potential claims that are out there?
We would like to know as soon as possible. So one of our obligations under the insurance program that we have with Chubb is to report the claims as soon as we are aware or should know or should have known. And so as soon as you become aware and you know about it, please report it. And it's better to know than, when you're served, because a lot of times that's when your witnesses are available and that's when we are able to get as much information as possible.
Very good. Amy, thank you so very much. I know that you and your team there in the legal department are busy every day serving 1.5 million Lions around the world. And the time that you've taken with us today is very much appreciated, because I know that there's other things you could have been doing, but the information you provided is valuable as we develop leaders, as we plan more service activities, and as we engage others in our volunteer efforts and ask them to join our association and become Lions. Thank you so very much. If anyone has a question for Amy or her team, you can reach her at legal@lionsclubs.org. And in addition to Amy, let me thank the staff that has screened the questions, helped us with the commercial breaks, and has helped us to produce this webinar. And most importantly, let me thank each and every one of you who have been on the webinar today to learn about the liability insurance policy. You will be getting via email a copy, an audio of this presentation. Please share it with your club, share it on your Facebook sites. Help us to get the word out that Lions Clubs International is standing behind its members. And if you want to be involved with the world's largest service organization, our door is open and we're inviting you to join us. The Global Action Team is very appreciative. Next month, our topic will be retention, and we're going to take that from the GLT, the Global Leadership Team's perspective, from the Global Service Team's perspective, and from the Global Membership Team perspective. All of us working together can and will improve the lives of others, because where there's a need, there's a lion. Thank you for joining us today.